This is Cast of Wonders, the young adult fiction podcast featuring stories of the fantastic. Episode 288 for January the 24th, 2018. Welcome! Every year in January, Cast of Wonders highlights some of our favourite episodes from the previous year. It's a great chance for us to take a bit of a breather. And wow, after reading every single one of those 664 submissions we got this winter, I know I certainly need one. It also lets you, our listeners, catch up on any missed back episodes with new commentary from a different member of the crew. I'm Catherine Inskip, Assistant Editor at Cast of Wonders. My day job is teaching astrophysics. When I'm not tucked away safely in my ivory observatory, I'm kept busy by my 2 kids and a colony of Beaver Scouts. Oh, and of course the Cast of Wonders slush pile. Sometimes I even have time for a bit of writing of my own. You can find my most recent story over at Lunar Station Quarterly. My staff pick from 2017 is Lost in Translation by Aefalstein Kloosterman, which originally aired as episode 249 on May the 21st, 2017. Aefalstein J.D. Kloosterman is a sometime teacher, sometime writer from the great state of Texas. He mainly writes fantasy, but also dabbles in sci-fi and fanfiction, and has recently been working on a steampunk novel. He especially loves stories that focus on the side characters, the people who don't get to be the heroes, as he thinks they have stories just as interesting. There are links to his website and Twitter account in the show notes. The narrator of this story is EA's very own Alasdair Stewart. When not hosting Pseudopod or running the fine company that bring you Cast of Wonders, he's professionally enthusiastic about genre fiction on the internet at places like Tor.com and MCM Buzz. His first collection of expanded podcast essays, Pseudopod Tapes, is available from Fox Spirit Books with Volume 2 Approach with Caution following this year. He lives in the UK with our intrepid editor Marguerite Kenner and their shared herd of microphones. Find him online at Alasdair Stewart or at his blog The Man of Words. And now, we've a tale to tell.
Lost in Translation by Aefalstein Kloosterman. It turns out, said the High Ecclesiarch of the Writ, that when the prophecy says the hero's body shall stand resilient against the flame, a more accurate translation would be resistant against the flame. He gave a pained grimace. Ancient Neonoxian can be ambiguous at times. Philip Stolford, hero of Neonox, chosen one of the Golden Age, bastion of chastity and valour, banisher of the Dark Torch, Vilthane de Singerson, and paladin of the Holy Writ, blinked back from within the mass of bandages that healer Ziva was carefully tending to. "Oh," he said. "Well, I suppose that's better than finding out I hadn't been pure of heart enough, or that the Great Scripter had taken a dislike to me." "The Great Scripter does not take a dislike," Ziva murmured, mixing up a salve. "His word is writ, it is eternal. He favours who he favours and disfavours who he disfavours. There is no changing with him." Aethelin, standing just to the left of the Ecclesiarch, snorted and rolled his milky white eyes. The others pointedly ignored the elf mage. "Okay," Philip looked chastised, "but it doesn't quite make sense. I thought the flames of Azranath were meant to keep all but the Chosen One out of the Shrine of Light. How are they supposed to do that if the Chosen One's not fireproof?" "Well, that's the other thing." The High Ecclesiarch exchanged a look with Ziva, but the young healer just shook her head and began painting the salve over an exposed patch of burned skin. The fingers of her left hand were playing about the rim of the salve jar, Philip noticed. She only did that when she was nervous. Maybe she'd had another vision. "As I said, ancient Neonoxian can be ambiguous at times. It is a beautiful, multifaceted tongue, filled with subtlety and nuance. In this case," cut in Aethelin, throwing the Ecclesiarch a dry look, Lithengrunin, which the popular translation renders as scar, is more literally translated as life blemish, which often does mean scar, but also, especially in religious contexts like the prophecy, more properly is meant to mean birthmark. There was a silence. A birthmark, Philip repeated. As I said, nuance. The High Ecclesiarch gave a strained smile. So, Philip's hand crept to his side. The star-shaped scar on my right thigh. It was a terrible mistake on Novice Ridley's part. The High Ecclesiarch spread his hands. On all our parts, really. The translation we were using was written by Scripter Verigome in 549 for its poetic nature, not its accuracy. There was a longer silence. Ziva finished painting the salve and began to wind the bandage tightly and firmly around Philip's unresisting arm. You're sure about this? Philip swallowed. I mean, Aethelin, you say it does sometimes... Aethelin's smug look had faded away. When you tried to pass through the flames and... He grimaced. Caught fire, you collapsed on the other side of him. You were burning to death, Ziva said softly. It was the first word she'd said in this conversation. We would have lost you, said the Ecclesiarch gravely, had not the Chosen One rushed through the flame and carried you back out. Philip blinked. What? Where did he come from? She, actually, Aethelin answered. Ziva. Philip turned to stare at the healer, who practically shrank away from his gaze. Makes sense when you think about it. Aethelin coughed. I mean, she was right beside you when the Tongue of Flame was turned aside. The gates of Ernio probably opened because she just stepped onto the threshold, do you remember? She was also the true vanquisher of the Black Flame, the Ecclesiarch swallowed. She quenched the unholy altar while you fought off the Burning Man, who in truth was but the avatar of the flame. The healer herself said nothing, but reached out a trembling hand toward Philip's arm. He withdrew the arm with a wince-like motion. She is a healer, and thus, like you, has followed a life of chastity, the Ecclesiarch finished. And a visions, Aethelin shrugged. The prophecy does say the future shall be open to him. Philip finally glanced over. But him! Ah. Again, the High Ecclesiarch looked uncomfortable. You see, ancient Neonoxian pronouns... Philip closed his eyes. The war had to go on, of course. The Staff of Luchim had been recovered for the first time in generations, and there was a chance to not only defuse but destroy Agrok Null. It didn't make sense for everyone to just give up because the wrong farm boy had gotten delusions of glory. It was even something of a relief to Philip to hear that the army had gotten over its initial reluctance to view his former oracle as the new chosen hero. It was for the best. They moved him to a Scripter hospital in one of the liberated cities. The burns he'd received were not ordinary ones, apparently. His legs would never be the same again. The fingers of his dominant hand were stiff with scars. Compared to those, what had happened to his face was really pretty unimportant. A few days after he'd gotten settled, Novice Ridley came to sit at the foot of the bed and clear his throat every 5 minutes. Philip spent his time carefully looking at anything but the Scripter. Finally, Ridley spoke. I knew the translation was wrong. Philip blinked at him. What? Any Scripter knows how to translate the original, Ridley said, staring at the floor. Peasantry and bards only know the poetic version because you can sing the words, but they start to teach you the writ, and it's ancient Neonoxian on your first day at the temple. The High Ecclesiarch was perfectly aware that Lithengrunin was more properly birth blemish when he told you to go forth with Arz's help. Philip didn't know what to say. It's ambiguous, you see, and Ridley looked miserable. The thing is, what does a star actually look like? Does it have 4 points? Or 5? Or 8? I mean, when you really look at a star up in the sky, it's just a dot. So some of us thought maybe it didn't really matter. Philip stared at him. Ridley flushed. No one stood against the Burning Man and the Flaming Mountain for 100 years, Philip. No one even tried, because they weren't the chosen one. But you destroyed half his army simply because you believed you were. Some of the clerics, we thought that was all the prophecy was supposed to do. Get someone like you to believe they could do all those things. Philip lay back and then slowly turned over. Ridley kept talking. We did try to test it. Scripters have tried to cross the flames of Azrinath before, but, well, we assumed the results were because none of them believed they truly were the chosen one, so I couldn't possibly tell you then, because... Ridley's words flattened into a droning tone. It flowed over him, wavering and ebbing in a meaningless river. Philip stared at the wall, letting the words wash past, even when they turned to screaming, and then to sobbing, and finally to a slammed door. Philip remained, staring at the wall. Fight must have been spectacular, Aethlin said as he and Philip sat in the light streaming through the windows. I was with the main army, but we saw lightning and flame leaping back and forth from the mountain. Great bursts of light, too, that pierced to the very skull. Then suddenly there was this, Aethlin gestured, blinding explosion, and the next moment the clouds were just dissolving away, like satin being shredded by a razor. The Chakru soldiers collapsed and broke apart into charcoal. She really did it. Philip closed his eyes. His burns had long since healed, but there were still scars all over his face, and the warm sun felt good. Yeah. Aethlin coughed. All throughout the land we've received reports of great pyres suddenly going out, of fire pits opening up, prisoners walking free. He shook his head in near disbelief. Agrok Null is no more. Already the bards are speaking of the end of the Black Age and heralding the beginning of the Luminary's renaissance. Luminary? Philip glanced over at Aethlin. Is that? Aethlin looked uncomfortable, realising suddenly he had said too much. It's just talk, so far. None of the ecclesiarchs have actually suggested making a one, but, well, bards have never let reality get in the way of a good story, have they? It'll be unprecedented, but there's a lot of weight behind it. She's supposed to head back to Bilibretich for the celebration. Who knows what might happen? He hesitated a moment. Some of the commons are even calling for a queen. Queen? Philip fell back onto the bed. He shook his head. That's incredible. There was a short, awkward silence. So how is Ziva? Philip asked finally. Perfectly miserable, Aethlin chuckled, momentarily forgetting to be uncomfortable. Keeps talking about how she's only a humble servant of Az. She can't stand the attention, and she's had to play catch-up, going through all the things the Chosen One supposedly has to learn. Sword fighting, magic, general history, legends. And remember, Philip said. Right. Aethlin coughed again. Seems kind of redundant, doesn't it? Philip frowned. I mean, she's destroyed Agrok Null. The rest of the stuff in the prophecy is pretty tame after that. Doubt she really has anything more to worry about. I mean, apart from this ceremony. About that, Aethlin coughed. She gave me a message for you, actually. Philip didn't look around, but the mage continued anyway. She was wondering if you might want to come back with me to Bilibretich to meet her as part of the festivities. There was a long silence. Aethlin studied his friend out of the corner of his eye, but Philip just gazed out on the landscape with lidded eyes. Then, is that the mandate of the Chosen One? No, Aethlin answered. It's the request of a friend. She thought, since you had such a large part in defeat... No. Aethlin looked at him. Are you sure? We all miss you, Philip. Even the army. You must have heard about the Burnt Legion. In Bilibretich, there's nothing I can do there. Philip said flatly. The last thing Ziva needs right now is someone showing up who people can use to supplant her as the true chosen one. At best, I'd be a distraction. You know what? Tell them anything. Tell them I'm dead. Martyrdom sounds like a great end to my ballad. Aethelin studied the man closely. You think they'll pity you. When they last saw me, I was a heroic warrior, burning in holy flames. I would rather be remembered as that than as feckless and broken, unable to fight, unable to walk, unable to even face Ziva. His voice choked and he looked down. Philip fell silent for a moment. Ziva, he said at length, when I first saw her, do you remember that? Rescuing the healers at the Font of Sarazen? Fograth was with us then, but when I saw her, she had this smear of ashes down the left side of her face. She smelled like... He closed his eyes, smile on his lips. She smelled like sweat and burnt hair. Aethelin pursed his lips, but said nothing. I didn't really mind the chastity thing, you know. Philip opened his eyes suddenly. Not at first. I never really had time for girls at the farm, and after we started fighting... A curl twisted his lips. It was really easy to resist the sort of vapid beauties who go throwing themselves at celebrities. He shrugged. Honestly, hadn't even really thought about the following the path of chastity line in the prophecy before, and I told myself it was safe to talk to her, to be friends with her. I mean, I was the chosen one. Chastity wasn't even a choice. It was a matter of destiny. It was never going to go anywhere. She was even a healer. Technically, healers don't take it. I know that now. Philip glared at the elf mage. I've been in a hospital for a month, Aethelin. I've talked to a lot of healers, which just means... He shook his head violently. You know, I almost wouldn't mind all this, he gestured, if he bit off what he had been going to say and looked away. Aethelin did not look surprised. There was an elegant sorrow in his face. I mean, why her? Philip burst out. Why couldn't it have been some random soldier? Or you? Or why? He raised a hand as if to protest, caught sight of the web-like scars on the back, grimaced, and laid it back down. A sigh. It just seems like the universe could have given me time to talk to her. A space just to say... A long silence. Well... Philip swallowed. I guess it's not really worse. It's just the same. It's still not going to go anywhere. He studied the scars on his hand. Probably not with anyone. Aethelin spoke. Phil, you know she would... Please. Philip whispered. I'd rather be forgotten. Hundreds of the hospital's patients left to see the chosen one at Bilibretich in hopes of receiving her healing touch. A contingent of scripters went along with them to care for them and also to help the rest of the brethren at Bilibretich. Philip did not. He was well enough now to get about with a pair of sticks, though he could not grip the sticks very well and had to strap his hands to the wood. He hobbled down the long halls, mapped out the empty rooms, and sat by the window to watch the golden sun trek across the sky and sink into purple at the far end. The day of the festival went. All of the scripters came back, full of excitement and praises. Philip heard little of the festival from them, though. He had begun to notice that often the scripters and now the other patients would fall silent when he entered the room, or begin speaking suddenly of some trivial and unrelated matter. Some few made an effort to include him in the conversation, but Philip did his best to discourage such helpful people. It was just so much easier not to have to talk at all. The interior of the ward was silver with moonlight when he woke, and it gleamed off the robed figure turning down the bed next to his, unmistakably outlining the form of a woman. Ziva? He said, eyes and brain still cloudy with sleep. Oh dear, please go back to sleep. I didn't mean to wake you. Roland had an accident and I was cleaning it, and Philip sat up, sleep banished from his brain entirely. Ziva! Slowly, the woman turned to face him. Her hands plucked at the corners of her hood and pulled it free. Ziva Pappas, chosen one of the Golden Age, exalted luminary, Oracle of Az, Paladin of the Holy Writ, First Queen of Neonoxia, stared back at him for one long moment. "Philip," she swallowed. As if breaking from a trance, Philip collapsed back onto the bed and turned away from her. "Philip, please." A hand cool as river water touched his shoulder. He didn't say anything. "Philip, please, I'm sorry. Aethlin gave me your message, but I had to..." There was a gulping pause, and he could almost hear her groping for words. "Oh, this isn't how this was supposed to go at all." He should be silent. The sooner she was gone, the better, but the words came out anyway. "What are you doing here, Ziva?" There were still tasks left in the prophecy, he knew. She still had duties before her. "I came to see you," Ziva answered. "I arrived at the hospital late yesterday. I thought I'd come down here in the very early morning, be beside your bed when you woke up, with the sunlight coming in the windows, but I couldn't sleep. So I thought I might as well mop the floors, and I just came in here for that, and then Roland had his accident, and I cleaned that up, and..." "Where is Roland?" Philip turned over to look at the empty bed where the dysenteric old man who had carried on one-sided conversations with him for the last month usually lay. Then he realised, oh, he's feeling better then. Ziva, he could see her clearly now in the moonlight, bit her lip. "I didn't mean to, I had to move him to clean up, and when I touched him, I didn't mean..." Philip wanted to roll back over, bite his tongue, stop talking to this beautiful woman, but he couldn't tear himself away. "Why are you apologising for healing someone?" Ziva looked away. "Because I can't. Your burns aren't... They don't matter." He cut her off. "They're just scars. Nothing important. Except for the ones on his hands, his feet, his legs. I'm fine." "No, you're not." Her eyes seemed to waver in the light, and her voice was thick. "Aethlin said you look terrible, and the High Ecclesiarch says you never leave the ward, and you don't respond to any of my letters, and..." "Do you hate me?" "No." Philip had hesitated just a second too long. Of course, why would you..." There was a long silence. "Not anymore," Philip finally said. At first, yes. A little." He hesitated. "Sometimes, still, on bad days. But even then, it's not really you..." He swallowed and coughed. "I don't hate you. Not really. I don't think I could. You don't think you..." She choked back whatever she was going to say. Philip wondered what she had been going to say, then decided that it didn't matter, because nothing in this conversation mattered. It couldn't go anywhere important. He rolled over on his bed, but not completely over, just enough so he could still see her out of the corner of his eye. He wanted to remember her, remember this final moment they would have together. "Philip, I wanted to..." Ziva seemed to fumble a bit. "You saved the world, Philip. You do know that." He had never before wanted to scream at her. "You did that," he answered dryly, still staring up at the ceiling. "I was just along for the ride." "I wouldn't have been along for the ride either if not for you," Ziva answered. "You brought the world back from the brink, Philip. I just finished what you started." Philip closed his eyes. Pain for him had never been so deep, so pervasive, not even what he could remember from the fire. "Why are you here, Ziva?" he bit out. "Did you really just come to give me a pep talk?" "Aethlin told me you were hurting, and I..." Ziva's form looked down at her hands, and she seemed to fumble a little. "Now," she admitted, the moonlight glowing on her throat. I needed to see you, be sure you were all right, but I wanted to talk to you. She looked up. "I missed you." Philip almost groaned. There was something uniquely awful and twisted about this whole situation. Why tell him this now, when she was the chosen one, when things were more impossible than ever? He ground his teeth, balled his hands into fists on the sheet. "I couldn't help myself." Ziva spoke quickly, clearly nervous. "I never can. Usually I can. I'm usually pretty in control. Just with you, it's just, I don't even realise what I was doing when you caught on fire. And just now, I was just walking around in the garden after Aphone left me with your message, and I saw the horse in the stables, and I thought, I didn't think... Philip couldn't take it anymore. Ziva, please, he said, turning to face her. Something seemed to loosen in her face at the sight of him. Oh, screw it, she moaned, and suddenly dipped forwards towards him, quickly and desperately, cupping his head in her hands, and she kissed him. It was a gentle kiss, light and nervous, grazing the uneven surface of his scarred lips and leaving it tender. Slowly, Ziva broke it, and slowly she pulled back, her eyes flitting over his face, searching very anxiously for a sign. Philip couldn't answer. Philip couldn't speak. He didn't even think he could blink, but Ziva must have seen a sign regardless, because her cheeks began to dimple in a shy smile. But Philip's mind could only grasp stupidly on one point. The prophecy! Oh, that! Ziva said, the shy smile broadening. Turns out, the word ought to be translated as charity.
This is one of those stories that I fell in love with when I first came across it in the slush pile. The weight of expectation is a massive driving force for the young people I see every day, just as it once was for me. Philip, in this story, was plucked from nowhere and expected to work miracles. But you don't always need a prophecy to chain yourself to a particular future. All of us seek some measure of security in life, and we often find it in becoming who we think we're supposed to be, by our parents, our peers, ourselves, or by breaking free of those strictures. We head out on our own quests in company or alone, or we stand at the crossroads, unsettled by our indecision, only moving because it becomes easier than standing still. Either way, eventually we've travelled so far down those roads that it stops becoming a choice anymore. You find yourself shaping yourself to the road ahead, and pretend the blisters don't exist, that it doesn't matter that it's all uphill, and you're wet and cold and sick of it. A lot of the time, the destination will be worth it. You can see who you're becoming. You're going to fulfill your destiny. But other times it's less straightforward. The destination isn't what you thought it would be. You don't want that destiny anymore, or perhaps it doesn't want you. If you're one of those people who's tied your sense of self-worth close to what you want or expect from your future, that can be a very bitter pill to swallow. We grieve the futures that are stolen from us, the people we can no longer be. But there are always other roads to take, and more than one way to be a hero. As a wise Jedi Master once said, the greatest teacher failure is. What this story also shows us is that you don't need to wait for a prophecy to come along before you take the reins of your own story. We all have it in us to be heroes. Philip didn't have any esoteric destiny, and he wasn't his world's chosen one. But he fought a hero's battles all the same. There are monsters to be slain and tyrannies to undo in all the worlds of our imagination. Sometimes, all it takes is enough belief to make a stand. Join us this weekend for our final staff pick, when our editor and host Marguerite Kenner presents her favourite. Cast of Wonders relies on your donations to pay our staff and authors, and to bring you the best in young adult audio fiction week after week. If you've enjoyed this story, please consider making a donation using the PayPal buttons on our site. Every one-time, or better yet, recurring monthly subscription helps. Now you can even become a patron on our brand new Patreon. Any help provided earns you our heartfelt thanks. You can share your appreciation for this story by leaving us a review on iTunes, sharing the episode with your friends and family, or discussing it on the EA forum, forum.escapeartists.net. We're at Cast of Wonders on Twitter. Come say hello. Cast of Wonders is a production of Escape Artists Incorporated and is brought to you by the creative team of editor and host Marguerite Kenner, assistant editor Catherine Inskip, associate editors Alexis Goebel, Alicia Caparasso, Amy Brennan, Andrew Ho, Chris Tang, Emma Smales, Carissa Sluss, Ray O, Sean Proctor, Susie Rodriguez, Tonya Bezpalco, Trace Fontil and Will Haight Minor. Our audio producer is Jeremy Carter, and our community manager is Danny Daly. Our episodes are released under the Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. You can share the episode, but you can't change it or sell it. The theme music is Appeal to Heavens by Alexei Nov, available from Promo DJ or his Facebook page. Thanks for listening.